radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right. Good evening, Fade to Black. How you doing? How you doing? It's the day after Christmas. Today is Tuesday, December 26, 2023. And I guess it's Boxing Day around the world, everywhere except the United States, pretty much. It is Boxing Day. And, you know, the history of boxing, it's kind of like a shopping day, I guess. I don't know much about it, but its origination was, you know, to give to the needy and to the poor, and leave a box on the steps of a church or something like that with stuff in it. And then they would give that out to the needy. And then, of course, you know, stores took over, commercialization took over, and Boxing Day is now a shopping day. It's kind of like Black Friday, I guess, here in the United States, where stores around the world open up early. Everybody goes shopping to get that stuff that they didn't get on Christmas, I guess, maybe return Christmas gifts. And, you know, and then all of the, you know, soccer teams, football clubs around the world, they traditionally have matches today on Boxing Day, and it's celebrated around the world, but not here. But for our international audience, happy Boxing Day. And I suppose, you know, it started in England, so I guess up there to the north of us in Canada, it's a pretty big deal too as well. So happy Boxing Day, everybody. I hope you had a great Christmas weekend. I did. It was very busy. I enjoyed it. I do, you know, pretty much the same thing that I do every year, which is load up the Jeep full of stuff, and I put on a Santa hat and I drive around to friends' houses and hang out. I did that, and I had a dinner with my daughter Nicole on Saturday night. Wow, it's kind of strange to have a 4-day weekend and then to have it as busy as it was. But yeah, I had a great Christmas. I hope you did too. We're rolling in to New Year's this weekend. I will be, again, doing the same thing I kind of do every year. Be heading out to Miami to Billy Carson's house for his New Year's Eve party, and I'll do what I did last year and the year before. I'll broadcast from there, and we'll do some live streams and all of that fun stuff. But I will be celebrating New Year's in Miami again this year. So I hope everybody has a great New Year's planned, and, you know, all those resolutions, and get those things in line. We've got a great week this week on the show. Tonight, Chris Coleman is with us. We're going to be talking about ghosts tonight. So we'll be doing that with Chris shortly. And tomorrow night, there was a film that came out called A Thing of Beauty, and which was on about Bigfoot, of course. And it's a flash of beauty, a thing of beauty. Same thing, by the way. And so tomorrow night, we're going to be talking about the Flash of Beauty sequel that is coming out with Toby Johnson and Eichenberger. And they will be with us tomorrow night. And then Thursday, hold on to your hats, kids. We've got Marcus Allen here of Nexus Magazine, and he did a really great documentary on the Apollo moon hoax many years ago that I've watched quite a few times. Marcus Allen will be with us on Thursday night, and we will be talking about the Apollo moon hoax and his challenge that is out there to anybody to prove him wrong about the Apollo moon hoax. So we'll be doing that. I don't do this too often. Very excited about Thursday's show too as well. So we've got a great week coming up. And there you go. I think that's about it. Let's go ahead and get things started. Tonight, Chris Coleman is with us. And we're going to be doing a deep dive into the history of ghosts and haunts. Talk a little bit about President Lincoln's beliefs on the paranormal and the history of ghosts, and even back into the Civil War. He's a freelance author. He's a lecturer. He's a consultant. He received his BA in history from St. Anselm College and pursued his graduate studies in archaeology and ancient history at the University of Chicago. He's hailing now from Nashville, and I would like to welcome his links for everything are below and over on social media. I'd like to welcome for the first time to Fade to Black, Chris Coleman. He's right there. Chris, good evening, young man. How you doing?
Well, I appreciate you putting me on. I'm glad to be on the show and meet all the good folks out there.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. Yeah, let's get you centered. Yeah, see,
sorry.
There. It's like we got half of Chris. Yeah, now we got all of Chris. Good evening and Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, all that stuff. Well, I've got to get the first time guest disclaimer out of the way before we get started, which is simple. Chris, it's just you and I sitting on my couch having a conversation as friends, and where that conversation starts, it starts. Where it ends, but we'll end as friends. There you go. You have to accept, though, to move forward.
That sounds good to me.
Okay. All right. That's strange. You can't, when you have to accept the terms, right? And you click, there isn't a box that says sounds good to me. No, it's either yes or no. Yeah. But are you out of Christmas weekend and are you ready for New Year's?
I'm getting geared up for New Year's. Yeah. Survived Christmas and Thanksgiving, so I'm forward to New Year's.
Yeah, and when you say survived, is it the typical family stuff that you have to deal with?
Oh yeah, 1,001 things, and people coming home for the holidays or leaving for the holidays, and all that fun stuff.
Yeah. This weekend I did a lot of driving and visiting friends and stuff and family. And looking at the amount of traffic leaving LA, and well, there's some coming into LA for Christmas weekend, mainly going out, leaving, but it was always in the direction that I needed to go in. And wow. And so when you have Christmas and now New Year's, right, on a weekend, smack dab on the weekend, everybody is traveling, and and probably also because nobody's been traveling for the last 3 or 4 years, and they're finally getting out of the house. It's probably a case of both things happening at the same time.
Yep. And Nashville too, they've always made a big after Christmas week is over the years has become a really big party leading up to New Year's.
Well, Nashville, we know Nashville because of country music, but Nashville is a pretty cosmopolitan city. And we were talking about that earlier. There's that part of it, but Nashville likes to have a good time. And it is built on the entertainment industry, and all of Nashville is a place to go see great music, and if right one after another, and it's tough to see bad music in Nashville. There's so many great musicians, and you've got to be good to get a gig. Therefore, right, the level of competition, you really have to mess up to see a bad band, don't you?
Oh yeah, and even down on Lower Broadway where the honky tonks are that's one district where there's a bunch of nightclubs. A lot of those bands perform for free. They just want to get noticed by the record producers. So, there's stiff competition.
Yeah, it's everywhere. I mean, every member of the band is as good as it gets. It doesn't matter, man. You could play if you're just playing tambourine, you're the best tambourine player in North America. Right? I mean, it's like that. It's pretty insane. Now, I want to get straight into ghosts tonight, and Nashville is a pretty haunted town too, as well, isn't it?
Yeah. It the thing is, my first book was called Strange Tales of the Dark and Bloody Ground, which is drawn from frontier days. When they first settled this area, was like middle of the Revolution. They bought they traded like 40 wagon loads of trade goods with the Cherokee in return for the land in basically the Mid-South, Middle Tennessee and Southern Kentucky. And they thought everything was hunky-dory and gave the Cherokee a whole bunch of trade goods, except the Cherokee left a little fact out that, the land belonged to the Chickasaw Indians, not the Cherokees. But they were grateful to accept the trade goods anyway. So for a few years, they had a lot of trouble with the various tribes attacking them. And that's where the dark and bloody ground part came from. Later on, you have like the Civil War. And this area there were armies marching back and forth all over the place for 4 years. So it earned that reputation yet again. And downtown, those honky tonks we were talking about, a lot of the old buildings date to the time of the Civil War. And when the Yankees occupied the city, they seized all the merchant buildings and converted them into hospitals. So there was a lot of dead and dying all throughout the city, and some of them, their spirits just never left the old buildings.
And why do you think that is? Is it because the spirits, or whatever they may be, are frozen in time? I mean, what do you think a ghost actually is? And listen, I need you to tilt your camera down. You're
back behind.
You're covering your mouth, and we need to see you speak.
How's that?
Well, okay. Now, don't move. Okay. So, what is a ghost?
Well, that's a good question. There are different theories. I'm one is, like you said, that it's the spirit of someone who died, and usually the theory is that they died prematurely or died of a very violent, sudden death, and had unfinished business. And that certainly fits the bill with somebody who died in battle. But also, there's another one that sometimes the apparitions seem to be almost like a recording. They don't seem to be conscious. They just repeat the same action over and over again, usually relating to their death. So there's that theory that sometimes the building, these old buildings, act like almost a psychic recorder, recording the whatever it was that caused them to stay on the earthly plane. And there are other theories too. Now, if you have some kind of entity that's violent and starts attacking people, the odds are that's not a ghost. It's probably something a lot more sinister.
Such as?
Demonic spirit, or evil entity. We have various theories, but I try not to be too dogmatic about exactly what these things are. We have the phenomenon, and that I have theories about it. So that doesn't necessarily mean that we might be wrong about what ghost is haunting a particular building. That doesn't mean the building isn't haunted.
And what do you think comes first? Right. Or is it just a little bit of both? Do some buildings attract, right? A hospital, a prison, where you've got tragedy and death and all of that stuff. So you have that side of it. And then you have the haunted castle. Then you have like my house, and I just have a normal house, right? It's the Brady Bunch house.
Right.
You drive by it on the street, it looks like the Brady Bunch house. It does. It really does. And it's haunted. Right?
Well,
It's
that's
haunted,
interesting.
right? Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. A house can, yes, maybe in the past, previous tenant, somebody who lived there, again, had a traumatic death or committed suicide, something like that, that caused them to linger. But you mentioned certain types of buildings attract hauntings. Theaters are notorious for having ghosts. Again, you're people who you have put on performances where it's make believe, and they're dressed up in period costumes. Seems to attract various and sundry ghosts who, as often as not, had no direct connection to the building. So there's something to be said for that. Also, obviously, something like hospitals and prisons, where there was obviously a lot of suffering going on, can also be focuses of hauntings too.
Yeah, for sure. And I did check with my neighbors, right? And there was nothing from the realty company, nothing from the neighbors, no statement. They were just like, no, man, it's a normal house. Now, I didn't. What I didn't do is go up to my neighbors and go, "Hey, man, my place is haunted, man. Did anybody get killed there?" No, I didn't do that. But I just brought it up in passing conversation about, there's two families that lived here since the house was built. That's it, right? Just two families, and everybody had nothing but nice things to say. Nobody told me anything shocking, but I haven't found anything in the papers, any news. It's really weird. And the property itself, it's not poltergeist, right? I'm not on an Indian burial ground.
See, that's the other thing. The house itself might not have had any kind of incident, but maybe the grounds before that, the previous house that was on the grounds, when they tore it down because it had a bad reputation, there might have been something like that. There on Music Row, there's an office building, a publishing house, fellow who it's called Big Red Shirt or Big Red, I think maybe. And now at the present time, as far as I can tell, the building is not haunted, but when it was the Capitol Records offices back 20, 30 years ago, it had some serious hauntings going on. And the general consensus was that the ghosts that were causing the poltergeist activities in there were not related to country music, but the previous house had been owned by two sisters, and they were spinsters who lived there all their lives. And there was a long tragic story about their father was a hardworking German merchant, and he was kind of a social climber, and he wanted to have his beautiful young daughters break into Nashville society, which back around the turn of the previous century was a very snobby place with all the Southern aristocracy and things. And he invited everybody to their coming out party. Nobody showed. And then he said, "You two will stay here and don't fix up the house, don't touch it, but you will stay here and show all these snobs that, they can't insult me like that." At any rate, the two ladies lived there all their lives, never married. And one of them died, and the sister didn't bother to tell the authorities that she died until neighbors started smelling something really really ripe coming from the house. And eventually the police arrived and took the other sister body to the morgue. So they think that that's probably what was the source of the haunting for the Capitol Records building back in the day.
Yeah, I heard about that quite a bit. I'm into music, a little bit, and I remember hearing about the Capitol Records building being completely haunted back in Nashville, and that how that place, it deserved to be haunted. Right? If you desecrate a body like that and you don't go through the proper what's the word,
rituals or services.
ceremony services, right. If you don't do all of that and show the respect, you're gonna have a spirit that's pretty pissed off. I don't like using bad language on the show, but that's probably what went on. And then not only is it residual because of the first sister, but then the second sister is going to die in a funky spot too as well, right. Being angry. And yeah, you've got yourself a haunted location for sure.
Oh yeah, and it was a well-known case back in the day, but and that's just one of the now what's now Big Red Shirt Records. I talked to the guy who owns it now, and evidently sometime about 15 or 20 years back, they'd had it quote cleansed by a psychic, so they evidently got the haunting out. So as far as present day goes, the offices aren't they haven't had any incidents that they could know of. But like I said, in the day it was when Capitol Records owned it.
Yeah, for sure. What's the ghost as we know them today in popular culture? How far back does that go? Centuries? Millennia?
Thousands of years. There are ghost stories from ancient Rome and Greece. I just listened to a podcast by the fellow from the British Museum who translated a ghost story from ancient Samaria. We're talking about 3000 BC, 3500 BC. Mm-hmm. So there have been ghost stories. I mean, and if you, again, whether they're true or not, people believed in them as far back as the Bronze Age. So, and probably further back than that. But that's the first written record.
Yeah, I had a guest on the show last year, maybe 2 years ago, and read me, the audience read me a ghost story, and the story was something like, it was the wording of it that was so strange. This businessman wanted to buy a new house, gets hooked up with his realtor shows him around the city, picks out a house, falls in love with it, buys the house, gets the key, moves into the house. And the first night that he was there, he heard these chains clinking in the hallway, and walked out and saw a full-bodied apparition there, and went back to the realtor, said, "What happened?" "Well, I forgot to tell you. Somebody was killed in the house, the previous owners." And he said, "Well, I would have liked to have known that before I bought the house, because this place is completely haunted and now I'm stuck," and so forth. And then he goes, "That was written in 100 BC in Greece," right? And I was like, wow. And it was funny because the direct translation, I'm paraphrasing, of course, but the direct translation was not that far off from the way, not only the terms that we use, but it's the situational part of it where things don't change, right?
Especially real estate agents.
Yeah, real estate agent and an owner and a complaint, right? Yeah. It was pretty wild to have a ghost story like that, which could have been written last week, but instead it was 2,200 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
What about when we look at something like ancient Egypt, where you have their religion based on, two different worlds and progressing to the next world. But you could also get caught in between and weighing your soul. And if you don't, right, all of these things come into play.
Oh, yeah.
And where ghosts are part of not only the religion, but a way of life and how your goals are set. The same ghost stories came out of Egypt as well.
Yeah, I can't remember any offhand, but Egypt was just the whole religion was just imbued with magical beliefs and practices. Like I said, the whole concept of mummification and stuff. Now, something might have had it might have been the Egyptian intense beliefs in otherworldly activities and strange goings on may have had something to do with the fact that they frequently used opium for headaches and toothaches.
I still do.
Yeah. Well, it was a commonplace for. I mean, they have little vials like this in the shape of a poppy bulb that from Egypt. That it's quite clear that they used them for medicine. They didn't seem to have a problem with it, but I guess a lot of people had toothaches. But what's really surprising is in the last few years, archaeologists analyzing using modern, DNA and chemical analysis of mummies dating back to, we're talking 2000 BC, 1500 BC, analyzing the mummies, they have traces of cocaine in them. And you have to understand that's really weird because cocaine was only found in the New World until Columbus. That was not available in Europe or Asia that we knew of. So that's a very strange mystery as to how the Egyptians got hold of cocaine and obviously used it as part of their mummification rituals for sending people to the other life. They still haven't figured that one out.
Right. Yeah, it's puzzling to me too as well. It goes both directions. There's different examples of Egyptian and you mentioned Sumer and Mesopotamia. Those connections here in Central and South and North America, which would include Egypt, as well as us, somehow, I don't know if it was trade routes or what, but a lot of things should not have been mixed around the world. And that's potatoes, tomatoes, tobaccos, corn. These things somehow got distributed and have been found all over the world. Cocaine is another classic example of that. How is that possible unless, right, there was contact, there was some kind of
trade network going.
Yeah, transoceanic. Yeah,
vast. Yeah, well, and you got to understand that we're talking about crossing from probably the Pacific Ocean. That's a vast distance to, even if it went through several different cultures, that we're talking about thousands and thousands of miles by sea and then by land. So they still haven't figured that one out, though.
Yeah, speaking of that, before we'll swing back to this, the history of ghosts. What about ghost ships? We hear about that so much, where these the stories are just fascinating, where an abandoned large vessel will be found floating at sea with dinner on the table, right, food stores, everything, but nobody on the ship and no lifeboats, nobody, and everybody is gone, and the boat is adrift at sea.
Yeah.
What do you make of that?
Well, again, it's unsolved mysteries that like the Marie Celeste and a couple of other ships like that, well documented. We're not talking about somebody's imagination, but that I mean, they have theories, but nobody's really come up with a logical explanation why people would just suddenly leave the ship in a hurry and not. And you could see them leaving if there was some kind of danger, and then row a safe distance, and then when it was all clear, row back. But that's not what has happened in some of these, like the Marie Celeste, the famous case. Edgar Allan Poe actually wrote a fictional version of that, but the nonfiction is famous in and of itself.
Yeah. And for those that have never heard of the Marie Celeste, what happened?
Well, it's exactly as you said. This was in the early to mid 19th century. I don't remember the exact date. I think it was like around the 1830s. A merchant vessel was cruising, and they saw a ship adrift, and they hailed them because they were out of the normal trade lanes, and didn't respond. So they sent a whaleboat over to investigate, and there was not a soul aboard, no signs of violence. Conceivably, pirates might have raided a boat, but you would have had dead bodies all over the place. It didn't happen. They went downstairs, and like I said, the meals, the crew was obviously in the middle of eating their dinner, and suddenly abandoned everything, food uneaten. And they never, again, they towed the ship to port and claimed the prize, but never, this mystery was never solved. Just never.
Yeah, no survivors of the Marie Celeste showed up anywhere.
No signs of empty lifeboats. No, again, it just nobody, all the theories. I mean, people come up with theories, but nobody's really been able to explain it.
Yeah, and could it be okay? All right. Obviously, it feels supernatural, right? There's something has gone on, and rolling into electric fog and getting swallowed into a vortex and the Bermuda Triangle, and there's all
disappearing
kinds of
with no explanation. Yeah,
right. There's that, or maybe they were just kidnapped by pirates, right? But why would you leave the food behind? Why would you leave the ship behind? Why wouldn't you
pirates?
Just take the whole ship?
Pirates are not there just to get their jollies, raiding boats. They're there for money. Now, not necessarily gold and diamonds, but the cargo. They would surely have taken the cargo and put it in their hold and sold it somewhere.
And stole the ship. They would have stole the ship.
Yeah, the ship they could repaint it and turn it into another pirate ship like Blackbeard used to do, or just sell it for a profit. So bear in mind, whenever you're talking about pirates were out there to make money. They weren't there. It wasn't a charity. So people forget about that. They weren't just sailing the high seas for the fun of it.
Now, moving forward, where you write a lot about ghosts in the Civil War, and Nashville is right there in the thick of it. Right there. It's everywhere. How close are you to the nearest Civil War battlefield?
Well, if you count the skirmishes, within 15 minutes.
Exactly.
You have to understand there were five major battles fought in and around the Nashville area, but there were dozens of and maybe hundreds of skirmishes and guerrilla actions in the Cumberland Valley and surrounding area. I used to know a friend. Greenbrier is a little town just north of Nashville. It's up on the Highland Rim, and he used to be the mayor of Greenbrier, and he told me that the people there knew where a bunch of Union bodies were buried, but they'd been attacked by a guerrilla. A wagon train was attacked by guerrillas, and all of them were murdered, and they just dumped the body in a common grave. And the people there know where the grave is, but they've never bothered to tell authorities because they were Yankees and they didn't want to give them the honor of a decent burial. But so there's things like that all over the area. And downtown, I spent 5 years with the city's museums. So I learned a lot about Nashville history while working for the Metro Parks. And there a lot of those old buildings that are now honky tonks on Lower Broadway and Second Avenue, they date to the time of and before the Civil War. Not all of them, but quite a few. And they were turned into hospitals during the war. The Union Army conquered the city very early in the war. They didn't destroy it like Atlanta. So they occupied it. They kicked the merchants out of their stores and either turned them into billets for the soldiers or officers or hospitals. And so there's like up on the Capitol Hill next to the government office buildings is St. Mary's of the Seven Veils. And that's was made into a Union hospital. There used to be a ghost that walked up and down the center aisle of St. Mary's. They think it was the bishop, and he was not happy about having been put in the basement. And then sometime about a decade ago, they moved his iron coffin up to the back of the church, and so he could hear the services go on. So they haven't seen him walking down the aisles lately. But St. Mary's was haunted for a while.
Any place called St. Mary's of the Seventh Veil is automatically haunted. I mean, it's just a given.
Yeah, and but the honky tonks, I would wager to say almost every honky tonk on Lower Broadway in Nashville, downtown Nashville, has at least one resident ghost. Now, the visitors, the people who are out there partying and drinking, probably wouldn't notice anything. I get the stories I get of hauntings is usually from people in the staff who, after the bars close, they're cleaning up and taking out the trash and stuff like that, and they'll have odd encounters. For example, I think I mentioned about one of the latest nightclubs is called Nudies down there, and it's not a nudie bar. Nudies is a clothing designer who makes rhinestone clothing for the country stars, but it used to be Lawrence Records, and once upon a time you could go in there and get old 78s and 45s from the early days of country music. And the owner told me about every once in a while he'd smell cigar smoke in the store. And bear in mind, there's no smoking allowed in stores in Nashville. It's a public ordinance. But it was this kind of cigars that his father used to smoke. So he was convinced that his father still haunted the Lawrence Record building. So take that for what it's worth. And I would imagine his dad is still hanging out there, even though it's now a nightclub.
What's that? Is it Printer's Alley?
Yeah, that's another one. I wrote a chapter. I've
walked the full length of Printer's Alley at night. Haunted.
It's an interesting place. It used to literally be where printers, the newspaper publishers and printers would hang out, and it stretches from between 3rd and 4th, from Union Street all the way down, or it used to down to Lower Broadway. When I first moved here, Printer's Alley was continuous all the way down to the bottom of the hill. Unfortunately, over the years, we've had, one and Boots Randolph's nightclub was around 3rd and Commerce. But over the years that they've kind of chopped up the Printer's Alley and built, office buildings and condos and things like that. So now it's only a couple of blocks long, and there are still nightclubs and honky tonks in the stretch between Church and Union. and it's an interesting night stuff. At one point, we're going back into the 1970s. The Grand Ole Opry moved out to Opryland, which kind of killed the business for the other bars downtown for a number of years. So at one time, at that time, Printer's Alley was the only action late at night downtown. But over the years,
so there was nothing on Second, and there was nothing on Broadway. Wow.
Well, it pretty much, except for a couple of dive bars, which didn't have live music, a couple of girly shows, adult bookstore. Lower Broadway at one point was kind of dead because they'd taken the heart of it, the Grand Ole Opry, and moved it out to Opryland. And so it took a number of years for the downtown area to revive. What they call the district is, again, that old, where all those old buildings are, 2nd Avenue, Lower Broadway, and the blocks off of Broadway, first 5 blocks or so of Lower Broad. And so now it's a hopping place. I mean, it's insane on weekends. And even weekdays, it's still busy. Yeah.
But all the buildings are, well, there's new buildings, but most of that area, those are the original structures. Right?
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of them are the developers have kind of descended like a plague of locusts, and they say, "Well, let's get rid of these old buildings. We want something brand new, like Las Vegas has." Well, Nashville isn't Las Vegas, no matter what they want people to think. It's got its own character, and a lot of people like it that way. And so it's got an authenticity as far as country music goes that you're not going to find in Las Vegas. And unfortunately, no casinos either. But although they're about, you can go up to Kentucky about half an hour drive and gamble if you want. But they print in Printer's Alley. I was going to say there was a Skull Shulman was a character who owned a nightclub in Printer's Alley for many, many years. He would he was an old fellow dressed in bib overalls, and he often had like a wad of $30, $50 bills, $20, $50 bills in his vest pocket. But he was kind of the lord of Printer's Alley, and he was well loved. He had a heart of gold. Unfortunately, one night, just before he was opening up for the night, somebody came by to deliver like a load of beer, and found him on the floor. He was still alive, but barely. And the police could tell there had been a terrible fight there. They didn't know at first. They didn't have any suspects. I used to know a lady cab driver, and she is very psychic. A lot of odd things happen to her. She's originally from up, I think, around Michigan, but she's been in Nashville for 20, 30 years. And she was that night when the attack on Skull Shulman occurred. She was happened to be in the vicinity, and one of the homeless guys that hung out in the alley. Sometimes Skull would give them a job, cleaning up and odd jobs, just at a charity, more or less. And she came across one guy while she was waiting for a fare, and he looked horrible. He looked like he'd been in a fight, and he didn't say exactly what had happened, but she kind of got like she described it to me like almost like a kaleidoscope of photos where you suddenly have, like, in rapid succession of him getting involved in the fight with Skull and having a knockdown drag out fight. And later on, the police interviewed her. Now, she told them about her psychic vision. Now that didn't make the official record, but she was a material witness who could put the two homeless guys in near Prentice Alley at the time of the attack. So she was a witness for the prosecution, and they were convicted and sent to jail. Like I said,
did that produce a ghost?
yeah. The Skulls Rainbow moved a couple of times, but where the original attack was, people have reported, being just going for a while. It was used as a storeroom, and hearing things or feeling things. And the folks who work in the Prentice Alley swear that the old Skulls Rainbow building or store is solidly haunted. So his ghost is believed to still haunt that area. The Skulls Rainbow has moved over the years a couple of times. New management bought it, and so it's still in Prentice Alley, but it's not in the same location.
Do you have a favorite Civil War battlefield to visit?
To visit? No, I still haven't. I've visited quite a few in the Mid-South here, and I still haven't finished my bucket list of places to go. Now, my oldest daughter, one of the prime places to go, obviously, is Gettysburg. And
you moved the camera in the wrong direction.
Sorry,
there you go.
Sorry. Is that better? Anyway.
Yeah, if you sit up straight, it's fine.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. That's the thing. How's that? Okay. At any rate, she visited there with some friends a couple of years ago, and she took some photos. Now,
was this you say Gettysburg?
Gettysburg, yes.
Okay.
And I have written a little bit about Gettysburg ghosts, but I haven't visited there, and I tend to shy away because there's been a couple of other writers who have done very good jobs of documenting the ghosts, and there's a bunch of them in the Gettysburg area. But in this case, she took a couple of photos that she didn't see anything to the naked eye, but later with her digital camera saw like a face in a window. And also she took a series of photos of an open field in the dark. And now the whole thing with ghost lights is very controversial. Some people say that, well, it's just a reflection off the lens of the camera. But she took, her camera was capable of doing low light without flash. So she was stationary and took a series of like 3 or 4 photos, just kind of pivoting in one place, and had what came up with where in one or two of the photos there were hardly any ghost lights, but then in the center two, it was like a whole bunch of them. So again, it's there ghost lights like that are controversial, but also photography in general. Nowadays people there's so many technical ways to cheat that you can always say, oh, that was they just photoshopped it or something like that. But I have in the past talked to people who swear that they've had cases where they took a photo like at Harper's Ferry of a fellow they thought was a reenactor pretending to be John Brown, and they got their photos taken that day, and he was bold as life. And then when they had the photo developed, they were there, but he wasn't in the photo. Now that's using film, not digital. So there's a lot of ins and outs to ghost photography, and it's very easy for somebody to be very cynical about it, and it is a complicated issue. But I know several cases where I believe that they're authentic.
When did you see your first ghost?
That's hard to say. When I was a kid, I had an apparition. The thing is, seeing ghosts, anybody seeing ghosts, is a very subjective experience. There are cases of people who swear they have seen a ghost, and maybe their friends were with them, like at the Bell Witch Cave, and the other person didn't see a thing. So you have a lot of cases where people see something that they see something that is there that other people say isn't, and vice versa. So as far as apparitions, I think that's a very subjective thing. And when you're dealing with witnesses, I tend to shy away with my own personal experiences because I don't. Again, you get to the he said, she said, or something like that. But I'll use my own sense of judgment as to if somebody is telling me a ghost story where they've seen a full-bodied apparition. It varies.
Now, but the question was, when did you see your first ghost?
Oh, I was about 7 years old.
And what did you see?
I saw it. I don't know that it was a ghost. It was a strange black figure late at night, and I'd woken up and was going to the bathroom, and it was on the windowsill of the bathroom. The room was dark, and it was maybe a foot or two high. Now, again, that's not necessarily a ghost. That also could be an alien, but I definitely saw it, and then when I turned on the light, it was gone. So that's my first encounter with something paranormal. Let's put it that way.
Did it seem solid? I need you to back up.
It was a solid. It was a black shape. It was solid, but it was almost like a how do you describe it? Its surroundings were normal, but where it was just total blackness. Nothing in there. So again, what it was, I have no idea. I'm not sure whether that was a legitimate ghost sighting or not. More often, I think more common than a fully embodied ghost is people feeling or sensing something. You go in a cave or go in a field, and you just get a creepy feeling that somebody's watching you.
Right. It's Chris. I need you to sit back up.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we're losing your mouth. See,
okay,
we're
I'm
only
sorry about that.
Yeah, we're only seeing this much of you. Okay.
I forget we're on camera, not in a bar.
Yeah, that's fine. Now, what about the first time? Take us through that where you went, okay, that was a ghost.
Well, my experience is more with other types of paranormal experiences, like prophetic dreams. Or people will often have very realistic dreams of their loved ones visiting them. I mean, we're not just talking a fantasy. We're talking as real as somebody in the room with you having a full conversation and it being totally, completely real. And then you wake up, or at least you think you wake up. So my experience is more with that sort of apparition than just seeing Andrew Jackson riding on his horse down the middle of the Hermitage Mansion.
Right. My ghost here, I've told the stories too many times. We'll get into those details, but one of the things, and it's very consistent, right? It kind of goes away for a little bit, but then it comes back. And anyway, when I first got the house, it was shoes being moved in my closet, in my walk-in closet. These shelves full of shoes, right?
Yeah, that's very common apparition or poltergeist. Right. And so, like the last 2 months, until about a month ago. So maybe, okay, so going back about 3 months ago, suddenly
the shoes stopped falling. And I made a deal with the ghost, by the way, that some things you can't make up. I will wear the shoes that you drop off the shelf. You've picked them out for me. Right. Okay. And I'm trying to make light of it with the ghost, not trying to get scared or anything like that. So that's what I was doing. And then, like one morning, I went in and no shoes were down. I was like, oh, I got to pick out my own shoes. Okay. All right. So for about 2 months, no shoes were falling. And then about a month ago, and this lasted for about a week, it has since stopped. You know what? Like 3 days ago, right before Christmas, I went, I bet you there's no shoes have fallen. And, I walked upstairs and I walked in. I had to get something from the closet. I'm always expecting, and there were no shoes on the floor. I was like, wow. But anyway, for about a week, about 2 months ago, I was getting like 4 pairs down. And they're from different shelves too. It's like weird. It's not, there's 3 shelves, right? Three racks. It's not like and they're sticky, right? The shoes don't, it was, and then it stopped again. And I thought I had it figured out, but no, it's really weird how it just, this is what I think. This is my theory. I brought it up on the show like 2 months ago. Brought it up on the show. No shoes have fallen in a couple of months, right? I mentioned it. I just happened to mention it. 4 pairs like that night. So yeah, it's just I just don't know. I don't know what's causing it, and it's definitely physical.
Well, there's also, and now that's more like moving things around. There's also cases where things will disappear completely from the house, and then maybe 6 months later, reappear. They call that a port, APORT, I think it is. In other words, it's transported somewhere. I mean, it disappears from the house. Nobody took it, or no human took it. But then, for reasons we don't know, the apparition brings it back, and where it brings it back from, we don't know either.
That sounds like a fairy.
Well, again, poltergeists. You could say poltergeists are a kind of fairy entity, but because they're mischievous.
Yeah, it's the same thing. No, you know what I mean? When I say it sounds like a fairy, I'm not saying there's a difference between one or the other. Mm-hmm. What I'm referring to is most people feel more comfortable in blaming it on a fairy than blaming it on a ghost, right? A fairy sound.
Well, now we can blame J.R.R. Tolkien for having fairies as being angel-like beings, but if you go to the old folklore, Celtic folklore, and that, sometimes fairies are friendly folk and or helpful, like the cobbler and the elves. But sometimes you get on the bad side of an elf or a fairy, and they can be pretty vicious. So you never want to anger the fair folk. That's right.
That's right. There's a movie with David Bowie. It's called Labyrinth. Maybe you've seen it. It's a sensational movie.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, in the opening scene when Jennifer Connelly, these fairies are flying around, mm-hmm. and one lands on her. She goes, "Oh, a fairy!" And she goes, "Ow! It bit me!" And what's his name? Hogwarts goes, "What do you expect fairies to do?" I never forgot that. We think of Tinkerbell. But if you go deep into the history, fairies were the opposite of Disney and Tinkerbell.
Oh yeah, yeah, and also the interesting thing is, the whole thing. You think of elves and the Irish and their fairies and elves. There was the Native Americans of the southeast of Middle Tennessee and Georgia and Alabama, had beliefs about fairies that were very similar to the Irish. I mean, very similar, because they had several different kinds. Some were small like that, the wee folk, but there were others that were, say, normal human size, like Tolkien's elves, but still magical beings, not humans. So
yeah, that's right. And for those of you that haven't caught on yet, Chris has referenced the Mid-South quite a bit. And when my parents, so let me just so everybody understands what the Mid-South is. When my parents lived in Memphis, and so I go and I visit, and I'm watching TV, and there's a commercial on TV, and it was something like the Mid-South's best news broadcast, right? The Mid-South's best hamburger, the Mid-South's greatest shopping mall. I'm turning to my mom, I'm like, the heck is the Mid-South? Never heard that. And it's only in that part of the country that refers to itself as the Mid-South.
Yeah.
But Tennessee in general, Memphis, Knoxville,
Southern Kentucky, like maybe North Carolina. Yeah, they're versus the Mid-South versus the Deep South, like Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana, where it's more hard. They haven't. Used to know one fellow I worked with, and he's down in Mississippi. They still haven't given up on winning the Civil War.
Yeah. In Memphis, the big sports arena there was called the Mid-South Coliseum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for folks, again, I'm sorry I didn't define the term, but in the Mid-South, a lot of people move to the Nashville area or the Middle Tennessee area, and they say, "Oh, this is the South. It never snows here. We're in the South." Well, guess what? Especially in like November, December, it can be 70 degrees one day and 30 the next, and you can also have a bright sunny day, and you think it's spring. It's going to be springtime, and then 2 days later, you've got a blizzard. So
that's why it's
the Mid-South is different from the Deep South.
That's right. Let's take our break right here. Our guest tonight, Chris Coleman. Tonight, we're talking about ghosts. And when we come back after this break, we're going to get into President Abraham Lincoln. Stay with us.
My job is not to preach. My job is to take you on this journey.
In a state of passion, nothing negative can happen.
That it's the moons of those planets that would have life.
Sometimes I see, these energies also in your field.
It is our passion and our pleasure.
Hi, everybody. Jimmy Church here. Very special announcement, and that is we are shipping Fade to Black t-shirts again. It's been almost 2 years. We did a full upgrade to the website, so you can head over to jimmychurchradio.com. It's all simple to do, and it's right there. Remember, we broadcast 4 nights a week, Monday through Thursday. We bring you the best, the brightest, the most knowledgeable and amazing guests, the best conversations. We do that 4 nights a week. We also do 4 days a week. We broadcast the news, and we do that live too as well. It's not a one-man show. I do it with website support. I do it with producers. I do it with writers and artists. All contribute to the show. The best way to help support what we do here is with the Fade to Black t-shirt. And you can get your Fade to Black t-shirt one of 2 ways. First, go to jimmychurchradio.com, order a shirt. It's really that simple. You're going to get a tracking number, it's going to get shipped, and it's going to get autographed. The second way to get a shirt is with a Game Changer membership. Now, the Game Changer membership not only includes a free t-shirt, but you get a private email to me. You get unlimited commercial-free downloads. You have full access to the website, and everything includes free shipping, and everything is autographed. So help support the show. Get your Fade to Black t-shirt today. The links are below. You can just go to jimmychurchradio.com, and it's right on the website. So there you go. I'm Jimmy Church, Fade to Black. I'm so excited that I just have one thing to say. Go Backley Tappy. River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Chris Coleman is with us, talking about the history of ghosts. Fascinating conversation tonight. And I was watching some of the comments there in the chat room. Everybody's enjoying the show because we all enjoy ghosts. We do. Now, not all are fun. But and my little haunting here at the house, which is ongoing, is just something that is. But the one now I have 100 ghost stories. But before this house, Chris, I would tell the story so often because it was a real thing that happened. And I'll tell you the very brief version of it. This is in Hollywood around 1987, 88, Hollywood, California. And I pull up at 2:30 in the morning to the back house of my then girlfriend and meeting everybody at her house. And not everybody, there was some people coming over. And after the nightclubs closed. So anyway, I pull up. I'm first. I pull up in the driveway to back house, and I pull up, and nobody's there. And I look over at the front porch of the house, and I see somebody pull back the curtain and look out at me. And I got angry because her roommate is there and is, making me sit out in the driveway. Right? When they could have said, "Hey, come on in." So anyway, so I get out of the car, I go up and knock on the door. Nobody answers. That really makes me. I knock on the door again. Nobody answers. And now I'm pretty angry. And I go back and I sit in my car, and I'm, and then my girlfriend pulls up behind me, and then another car pulls in behind her, and she gets out. And I said, your roommate's here and won't open the door. She goes, no, she's not. She's right there. And they had pulled up behind her. And I was like, then who's in the house? And Chris, the roommate's boyfriend, pretty big dude. He's like, let's go. So we go into the house. Everything is locked. All the windows there's nobody there. And we were pretty freaked out. And I went back to the window and I pulled back the curtain, and I'm looking at my car at, like the part. And I was like, man, wow. All right. Now, what was it that we saw? Now, there was a follow-up to this the next day with the landlord. That's another story. But this is something where my memory and the way that this went down, it was what it was. That I saw a ghost, and I don't have another way to put it. There wasn't anybody in the house. The house was locked, and from the inside. So I saw a ghost.
It sure sounds like it. I remember that sounds, well, sometimes some of my favorite Civil War ghost stories are similar, where you have modern day people kind of interacting and assuming that, they're just being jerks. In the Shenandoah Valley, there was a big battle that involved, forces, and that house, one of these old antebellum mansions, has been restored. And in the hallway of the mansion, it was a antique rug, very, very delicately made, large rug. And they sent it out, the museum sent it out to be dry cleaned very carefully. And they gave instructions to the crew that was taking the rug to the cleaners, and says, now, do not bring it on a Sunday, because we are closed on Sundays. Just any other day of the week, there will be somebody here to help. You bring the rug in and put it where exactly where it should be. Well, the cleaners, they did a very good job of cleaning and restoring the rug. But guess what they didn't do? They didn't bring it to the Monday through Saturday. They brought it on Sunday when the museum was closed. But the two delivery drivers, when they were questioned, said, oh, yeah, no, there was no problem. There was a lady on the front porch. She was dressed up in one of those costumes, and she just she pointed into the door and just pointed exactly where we were supposed to put it, and we laid it out. No problem. Only problem was that lady didn't exist. There was no staff, nobody, no reenactor there on that Sunday because the museum was closed. But they didn't know the difference. I mean, for all intents and purposes, they thought that was just one of the staff. So that's one of my favorite.
I love stories like this. Yeah. I love stories like this, and these period ghost stories told in a modern in modern context. Mm-hmm. But these stories are everywhere.
Oh yeah.
And the Civil War was a horrific style of battle. No war's good. And killing is just it's violent and everything. But the Civil War, nasty, large lead bullets shot at point blank range, and when you didn't have any shots left, you were, everything was close quarters. very violent, battlefield hospitals, things going on. It was a raw, nasty, and it covered much of the United States at that time. It was bloody, and there has to be ghost and how do I say this? Wandering spirits that meant a very violent death throughout that part of the United States.
And also bear in mind that the losers in a battle, for example, and this is true in our area and other parts of the South. The winners, they got to be put in a nice coffin, maybe even embalmed, and sent home to their families and have a nice memorial. The losers were just tossed in common graves, dozens, maybe hundreds of people in one common grave, and the dirt thrown over them, never to be given a consecrated burial or even a memorial marker. So you have that in a lot of areas. In Nashville, there was a Battle of Nashville. It pretty much the entire south side of Nashville was the battlefield, from downtown all the way over to there's a nice suburban neighborhood called Green Hills. And when I worked with the city parks department, one lady came by one day and she said, they were in her neighborhood, they were putting in a new subdivision, all upscale homes. And the developers had the bulldozer came across like a mass grave of skeletons, Confederate dead. And developers being developers, they didn't want the construction delayed by archaeologists coming in with a toothbrush and dental pick, carefully excavating the remains. So they told the workers to just shut their mouths and cover it over again, and just kept building.
And they did? Isn't that against the law?
Yes, it is very much against the law.
So what happened with the people that bought the houses there?
Well, that's an interesting question. You've got a whole lot of people who died sudden violent ends and were never given a consecrated burial, and a bunch of upscale homes that maybe I can't go door to door knocking. Have you seen a ghost today? But my hunch is that in the Green Hills area near Shiesell, there are a bunch of homes that have odd things happening every so often that people don't like to talk about.
Yeah, like every day. I mean, man.
Remember the movie? What was it? Was it Poltergeist?
Yes.
Back, where the developer did exactly that. It happens. It happens.
Yeah, Poltergeist was filmed not too far from here in the subdivision. I've driven by that house. It's a pretty popular. I would hate to own that house. And the Brady Bunch house was just bought and sold, and right there in Studio City. And I thought about that, just like the Poltergeist house and the house from E.T., right? Again, shot right here in the valley. I would never want to own one of those houses because you're going to have somebody driving by all the time. And the same thing with the Brady Bunch house. Why would you? I would love to own it, but think about who was driving by. And so, speaking of this, a friend of mine, he recently passed. His name's Paul DeArmas. And Paul DeArmas was a hairstylist, very famous hairstylist here in Beverly Hills. And cut all the rock stars' hair, everybody, movie stars and stuff like that. But he cut my hair for years, 20 years. And I'm staying at his condo. It's on Doheny and Sunset Boulevard on the corner. So anyway, one night I'm sleeping on his sofa. He had these wooden floors. And I wake up in the morning, I go, Paul, dude, what are you doing walking around all night? Right? And he goes, that's my ghost. And I go, what? And he goes, dude, I have a ghost. There are footsteps all day long, all night long here. And it really kind of freaked me out. So, but him and I hung out a lot. Well, anyway, this is what ended up happening. I'm not sure if I've told this story before. So I'm out in front of his house, his condo. It's on the first floor. And there are these hedges, and we were like rose bushes, drinking coffee in the morning. And this Hollywood tour bus thing, with the tourist on it, stops in front of his house. And everybody's taking pictures of me drinking coffee, right? I'm like, what the hell? Right? So anyway, I go to Paul. I go, dude, like 4 tour buses stopped and took pictures of me today. He goes, they didn't take pictures of you. I go, what do you mean? He goes, this used to be Marilyn Monroe's condo. Oh. I go, what? This is some things you can't make up. And this is one of them. I'm like, is that your ghost? He goes, maybe. I don't know. What? You could have told me all this stuff before. But again, the residual stuff, right? Movies like Poltergeist are based on real life events. And if you choose to have a house that's in a strange location or had somebody die, Marilyn didn't die here. She just owned that place. She died in her home here in Los Angeles. But nonetheless, I heard the footsteps myself. They were real and they were loud and they lasted all night long. Like somebody just didn't want to go to sleep and was just walking around on the wood floors. It drove me crazy. And I thought it was him, like wearing high-heeled shoes.
Well, one of the more famous traveling ghosts, and Marilyn's been cited in various places too, but is Elvis. Elvis, the ghost of Elvis gets around. Of course, he's been reported in Las Vegas, because he had a mansion down there, and he's been sighted there in a couple of different places. Of course, Graceland in Memphis is, Elvis Central for ghost reportings, actually Nashville has a connection too. It's a pity, but a few years ago, Colonel Tom Parker's home was up for sale, and I wish I'd had the money to buy it because I would have turned it into a museum called The King and the Colonel, but they didn't get enough interest, so they bulldozed it and turned it into a car wash. But over in downtown, close to where not too far from the honky tonks, it used to be RCA Studio A. Now, RCA Studio B is open to the public. It's owned by the Country Music Hall of Fame, and they give guided tours of that. But the original Studio A was over. It's kind of near. It was near the interstate on McGavick Street. It's now an empty car lot, used car lot. But it was a kind of a funky old building where they did recording, and then later on they did videotaping. Unfortunately, it's probably the way Nashville's going. It's probably 6 months from now. It's probably be bulldozed and turned into a high-rise condo. But it had a lot of reports of odd poltergeist-like activity that the record people swore was Elvis giving editorial comments when they were recording. And that building was where the song that made Elvis was a very odd song, but it was a beautiful song. It's called Heartbreak Hotel. And I don't know if you're familiar with the backstory of that. Heartbreak Hotel was written based on a suicide note. A young man committed suicide, and one of the phrases in there was, "I walk the lonely streets." And Mae Axton, Hoyt Axton's mom, saw that, and she wrote the whole song based on just on that one lyric, that one passage, and it became a huge success for Elvis. Basically, put him on the map, and that's Studio A, RCA Studio A, which is, like I said, now it's just an empty lot, is where he recorded it. And his ghost, now, if you want to hang out at 3 a.m. and see if you hear any odd things going on, you'd be my guest. But that building was reputed to be haunted when it was up.
I would dig the ghost of Elvis. I would. I've toured Graceland maybe a half dozen times, going back to my early 20s, and what's the word I want to use? First off, they're playing just like sad Elvis love songs all the time there, right? So you got that going on, setting the mood, and nobody's laughing and having a good time, the tourists, and neither was I, because I'm an Elvis fan, and this is but it's got a weird vibe to it. I'm not saying it's haunted, but there's a weird vibe at Graceland, for sure. It's kind of, I don't know, kind of.
Well, over the years, there've been reports. Some people say, "Oh, it's not the ghost of Elvis; it's actually Elvis who's hiding out from the public, and he's still alive." So there's that theory too. But I would say if they saw somebody that looks like Elvis, it was probably his ghost. But
no, let's swing this over to Abraham Lincoln. He had a huge belief, him and his wife, Mary Todd.
Lincoln, like Elvis, his ghost gets around too. He's been sighted in Springfield, Illinois, of course, in the White House, and other locations too. Now the thing is, the stories have been circulating for years and years and years. And in my first Civil War ghost book, Ghosts and Haunts of the Civil War, I did write a couple of chapters on that, and also on the ghosts of the conspirators. But I figured, there's a bunch of these stories that have been circulating, and what I wanted to do was document them. In other words, cite chapter and verse, pin down the original source of the story, and verify whether the story is true. And so I came up with a book called The Paranormal Presidency of Abraham Lincoln. And what I did is I went, like a good historian, went to the primary sources, eyewitness, people who were his close friends, associates, business partners, and the like. And it turns out that, there's a number of ghost stories about Lincoln, but the focus of that book is not so much ghost stories as his belief in the paranormal. Because, again, mainstream historians and academics kind of want to de-emphasize his belief in the supernatural things. But he had a very strong belief in a lot of that. First of all, he believed in fate. He believed in his fate, that he was destined to greatness. He believed in prophetic dreams. I mentioned my experience with realistic dreams of deceased loved ones. He had several dreams like that. And so did his wife too. But, they lost 2 children when they were small children. So, psychologically, you can easily see how that would emotionally impact 2 parents. And they tend to blame Mary Todd Lincoln for, she was just crazy and he was humoring. No, I like I said, I dug down deep to the primary sources. She believed in the supernatural and in paranormal things, but so did he. And
what as you started to document this, give us some examples of what you're referring to. I understand the dreams side of it, but what else did he have deep beliefs in with the paranormal?
Okay, well, he also, when he was a young boy, he was taking a load of grain to be ground at the local mill, and the donkey, he brought the donkey, hitched it up to it's kind of like a circular hitch, and then the donkey would walk around in a circle grinding the corn into the flour. Well, he was, getting the stubborn donkey to do its job, and then the donkey decided to give him two hooves to the head, and now potentially that could have killed Lincoln. What it did is he was knocked out, stone cold, to all appearances, a death-like appearance, and no signs of breathing for 3 days. And then suddenly he woke up. Now, why I mention that is in the paranormal literature, it's been very well, and mainstream psychologists have noted this too, that people who have near-death experiences, and this was a definite near-death experience, often something like 25% of people who have a near-death experience after that event will have an increased awareness of or experience of paranormal or psychic events. And he would have, like I said, not just dreams, but for example, when he was running for president the first time in Springfield, he was getting the returns from the polls, and he, at a certain point, he took a break from, because in those days it took a lot longer than it does now. Went across the street, lay down, and there was a big, tall floor-length mirror, and he lay down opposite it. And then he kind of took a short cat nap, and when he woke up, he noticed that his image in the photo was somehow altered. There were two images, one his normal one, and the other kind of a ghostly pale image. And he interpreted that as that his first, actually Mary was the one who interpreted the apparition, that he would have a fruitful and successful first administration, but then the second would be he would die before the end of he finished his term. That one example of prophetic, not really a dream. He was wide awake, but there's several instances where he would have things that disturbed him, and usually it scared the hell out of Mary, and she would force him to tell her what was bothering him. For example, close to the end of the war, he was sitting down reading the Bible, and every time he opened a page, it seemed to refer to death and dying of a king. That's another, again, Mary. You can dismiss this as just Lincoln being morbid. The most dramatic was at the very end of the war, April 14th, 1865. Lee had already surrendered to Grant. They were holding a cabinet meeting in the White House. Grant was late to arrive. So while they were waiting for Grant to give a report of the surrender of Lee, the cabinet, including Lincoln, started discussing, the chit-chat. And then Lincoln kind of said, well, I had that usual dream again last night. And then I think it was the Secretary of State, what usual dream was that? And he says, well, it kind of referred to your domain. He pointed it to the Secretary of the Navy. It was a ship sailing on the sea to a far distant shore. And I have had this dream after every battle or major incident in the war. And I had it last night, and that tells me that we're going to have good news coming from General Sherman, who is still tracking down the other Confederate army down in North Carolina. Well, it turns out that it wasn't the surrender of Sherman that was the prophetic incident, but his own assassination, because April 14th, 1865, that evening he went to the theater with his wife to watch Our American Cousin and was murdered. So within days, people all across the country had heard rumors of his own prophetic dream that he predicted his own death. And he in the weeks before the end of the war, he'd had several kind of incidents like that where he had either a waking vision or a prophetic dream, and like I said, it's there are eyewitnesses to all of those events. And like I said, I tried to, because they've been, a lot of them have been known about, and people would kind of spin them, add to them, like and make it puff it up a little bit. But this, the like I said, and Walt Whitman wrote a poem about that dream, Captain, My Captain. That was based on Lincoln's own eyewitness account. So we have a lot of evidence documented, and Lincoln was also practitioner or believer in seances. Now that's a kind of debatable area. Obviously, seances have become kind of, especially actually after the Civil War, they became discredited in many circles. Before the war, a lot of people turned to seances as a way of getting in contact with loved ones who had passed. You got to understand, in the mid-19th century, a lot of people just died of plague, cholera, you name it, just childhood diseases, things that today we take for granted. A lot of children died before they reached the age of 10. So
infected tooth, no antibiotics.
Yeah. Just something
he had a couple of days left. One of the I'm going to get back to seances at the White House. We all know about Warner Brothers and Warner Brothers Studios, right? Well, there were 3 Warner Brothers, right? And the sister Dot. But anyway, one of the Warner Brothers goes to Cuba. This is in the 1930s. Infected tooth, right? Comes back to the United States like 4 days later and dies. It seems like, no antibiotics.
Yeah.
Right. And that's just the way, I can't imagine, talking about the Civil War or those periods, any time before, antibiotics. But man, you're out in the yard and you cut your leg, or whatever, and you look and that's it.
That's why they would amputate. They said, well, if we don't amputate, you'll get gangrene. And of course they didn't bother to clean their surgical tools. But the thing is, it was like they didn't have time to say, well, we'll clean the wound and see if it turns festers, we can always give you antibiotic. No, that they, by the time you found out it had festered, you were already too late.
It's too late. It's too late. It's too late, man. I have Neosporin like in 4 locations in the house. I do. It's like this here. And I'm working on my motorcycle this weekend. I'll show you this little teeny tiny cut, right? Mm-hmm. Right? Okay, little teeny tiny cut. I dropped everything in the garage. Ran in the house, Neosporin, Band-Aid. It's just like, but we can do that today.
Yeah.
Back in the day, they'd cut your finger off. It's like, oh man. So seances at the White House. I remember when I was a kid, reading about Lincoln and Mary Todd, seances in the White House back then were a thing.
Oh yeah.
This was something that went on and is completely documented, isn't it?
People have to understand that before the Civil War, the attitude towards seances was very different. It was a combination of, yeah, you wanted to get in touch with your deceased loved ones, but it was also something of like a parlor entertainment. People have a seance and would kind of see what they could come up with, you know. So there was a little bit of entertainment aspect to it too. Now Lincoln, the mainstream narrative that academic historians and serious historians say, oh, well, you know, again, he was just humoring Mary, who was very neurotic, and, you know, they won't say she was a crazy bitch, but, you know, that's their implication. Mary was nothing of the sort. She had a temper. And as a matter of fact, there's quotes of Lincoln saying he kind of admired her feisty nature as long as it wasn't directed at him. But the thing is, she was highly educated. She was the one who created the office of First Lady as a hostess. Dealing with European diplomats. She could speak fluent French, and Lincoln was a brilliant orator, but he was a little rough around the edges. Mary kind of complimented his skills, and for whatever you might say, she was good at the diplomatic end of things. And so when they held social events at the White House, she made sure everything was done as European and diplomatic society was assumed. Again, so she wasn't crazy, and and you also have to understand that both of them, they had lost two sons. Eddie, I think, was the infant, and they had another one who's only like 10 years old. Both died. The second son died in the White House in the middle of the war, and so that was kind of a serious blow, both for Mary and Lincoln. And they both had dreams where their children came to them. In Mary's case, several of her relatives had been officers in the officers in the Confederate Army. So she had dreams where her brother and brother-in-law also showed up. And so again, Mary attended seances, Lincoln attended seances. Sometimes they attended together, sometimes separately, but it wasn't really an either or thing. And I came across the one case where there was a lady who was evidently, or she believed she was a psychic. Again, we don't know whether these people really were psychic or just believed they were psychic, but it doesn't matter. That was part of the society at the time. He was with the post office and held seances in his home in Washington with Lincoln, first with Mary and then with Lincoln. And these seances were not that well documented in the popular literature today, but I came across it. And again, it's now you have to also understand there's another political aspect to this. A lot of the people in those days who were what we would call progressive, or I don't know, see, modern political tags don't really apply to the 19th century. There was no left or right, even though there was people were had violent opinions about things like slavery and states' rights. But when you think of left or right, that didn't exist until the 20th century. So, but there was a lot of people with, say, progressive ideas were also involved in the seances and things like that. The fellow who founded it was a name named Andrew Jackson. What was his name? It wasn't Andrew Jackson, but he'd fallen asleep one day and woke up 40 miles later on top of a mountain in New York. And he first started developing, he'd give out prophetic statements while he was asleep. And then later on was able to do it without the help of sleeping. He'd just go into a trance. And he predicted the creation of, he basically was the father of seances. And then it spread to Europe too. But it kind of started in the United States, in New York, and it included abolitionists. And a lot of people who are in the abolitionist field were also involved in again, doing seances. So there's an overlap between the two, some of what we would call New Age, I guess, New Age activities. Phrenology was another thing, feeling people's bumps and reading their personality based on the bumps in their head. So there was a lot of these different, let's say, experimental movements that went hand in hand, and abolitionism, phrenology, seances, they were kind of overlapped. The same crowd, some of whom were very politically important, were involved in it. So Lincoln,
that's who Mary Todd and Abraham brought to the White House for their seances.
Well, several of them. What it was, the Secretary of the Navy, I believe. Was it Chase? I'm trying to remember now. Chase was him and his wife were big believers in seances and doing that sort of thing. And he'd at one time been running as a candidate for the presidency in the Republican Party. And it turned out that Samuel Chase's wife had also lost a child in Washington, due to disease. And so when Lincoln's son Willie came down with a fever, she was tending to him when Mary had to attend a social function in the White House. Later, Willie died. He was the second son to die prematurely. So Mrs. Chase and Mary were very close. And again, Samuel Chase was a close friend and ally of Lincoln too. So there's I didn't go. I spent 2 chapters on the seances and the Lincolns, but there's still more information out there regarding the political overlap, and especially with abolitionism and other movements. So again, it's some things that don't seem like they connect to us today. Back then, for folks, it was a different story.
Right. And what was when you staying on Lincoln and of course Mary Todd, did they have goals set? Were they trying to reach out to somebody specifically? Like, well, of course they had 2 sons, but what were the reasons behind it in having the seance? Who were they trying to talk to?
They wanted to get in touch with their 2 deceased children, and in Mary's case, with several of her brothers or her brothers-in-law. But it was also convenient that a lot of influential people in the North, political, money people or intellectuals, were also into the same thing. Now, that's not to say there weren't charlatans. There's one famous thing that was published it was in the Boston Globe, but it was also published in widespread in a lot of newspapers at the time. And it kind of, Lincoln's kind of acting like in this report by the reporter, he's taking the psychics seance with a grain of salt, and there is he's kind of they're promoting it that yes, he's one of us, but also but he's not necessarily believing everything that the psychics telling him. So again, it's other people have reported on that particular incident, but there's like I said, a political aspect to the whole paranormal seances. He had a lot of other beliefs too that came from his frontier heritage, like one of his early employers believed was a ghost. It was a horse whisperer, that you could talk to horses and they'd understand what you said. When one of his sons was bitten by a snake, they believed that if you rubbed a certain type of stone on the wound, it would prevent the poison from spreading. And when one of his sons, I think it was Willie, was bitten, he rushed to get what we would say magical stone to counteract the poison. So he believed in a lot of folk medicine, let's put it that way, that really had kind of supernatural or paranormal overtones to them. And again, he would believe in omens too, like something he would like a sunset was particularly prophetic. He'd say that that's, I may be superstitious, but things like that.
Was it? It sounds like it was just daily life for the Lincolns. A firm, solid belief in not only the paranormal and the supernatural, but coincidences and synchronicities and everything else, and dreams, of course.
Fate.
And fate every single day. Is that the way that they live their life?
Well, both he and his wife were like that in a number of aspects. His wife one time told a friend that she says she would never marry a poor man, but she's going to marry Lincoln because he's going to become president one day. And so this is when he was a country bumpkin lawyer, had no prospects for going to high office, but somehow she was visiting from Kentucky, and her woman's intuition decided that this man was going to become president, and she was going to become first lady. That's documented. There's also that Lincoln himself, his law partner, said that he believed he was fated to go achieve high office and do things for the country, but that he would also be struck down before he would be able to enjoy the fruits of his success. So his own lawyer from Springfield is quoted on that. Of course, a lot of the things his early law partner had written down, people kind of mainstream historians have kind of poo-pooed, but he went around getting firsthand accounts from a lot of the local people that knew Lincoln when he was very, very young. Now, this brings up an aspect. I hope you don't mind me, but I won't call it conspiracy theory, but of Lincoln's four sons, the only one that lived to adulthood was, and he was actually a very accomplished man, but Robert Todd Lincoln lived to a ripe old age. He became Secretary of State. He was ambassador to England. He could have, if he'd wanted to, he could have easily have become president. He chose not to because he didn't like he didn't say it outright, but he didn't like the corruption that he saw that came with becoming president. At any rate, he was, the official history by the Nikolai and Hay, I think, are the two fellows who wrote like a 10-volume, more or less official history of Abraham Lincoln. Basically, Robert Todd Lincoln went line by line censoring just about everything in there that he didn't like. I mean, it's still one of the basic sources for Lincoln's life, but he cut out a lot of things that he thought would not reflect well on his father's career. To us, it might seem nothing, but you have to understand that a lot of what we know about Robert Todd Lincoln has been heavily censored. Not about Abraham, has been heavily censored by Robert Todd.
Robert Todd removed all mentions because Mary Todd and Abraham, they had it all except for Bigfoot and UFOs. Rumor has it Robert Todd had that stuff removed. Bigfoot.
There's one report of somebody visiting the Robert's home in Vermont one weekend and came across him in his parlor or his office, and he had several satchels near the fire, and he was feeding document after document after document into the fire that he didn't want anybody to ever see. So
UFO documents.
We don't know what was in them, but
right. That's crazy.
You think
that's absolutely
60,000 emails is something? Robert Todd Lincoln.
Chris, what a fantastic show tonight. Thank you for the conversation. You've got a couple of blogs. Tell us about those and how often do you write?
Well, I've been kind of took a vacation for the last 6 months, but starting with the new year, I'm planning to crank back up. And I might even convert some of the blog articles and put them together in books, because I've been thinking about self-publishing a sequel to Ghosts and Haunts of the Civil War, because there's a whole bunch of them. Some of them I wrote on the Civil War blog is the late unpleasantness, which is one term for the Civil War. It's kind of a polite way of describing a very bloody conflict. And so the late unpleasantness is this specifically Civil War related. Sometimes I'll go do ghost stories, but certainly more about battles, skirmishes, or personalities. Dixie Spirits, and again, it's named after one of my books. Dixie Spirits is kind of a sampler of Southern ghosts, authentic Southern ghost stories. And that's another one where I've kind of documented either stories that didn't get in the Dixie Spirits book or Dark and Bloody Ground book, but put in there, or in some cases they were stories that did get in the book, but I came across other details I wanted to add about the haunting. There's also one that's kind of a drum and trumpet. It's kind of a general military and political commentary, and one relating to, I'm also very much interested in the age of Arthur, King Arthur, and the quote round table. So I occasionally post an academic article there. And I've been doing a little research. I have actually a novel on that I've been working on for not as long as George R.R. Martin, but for a number of years, relating to not King Arthur per se, but to his predecessor, Old King Cole. Old King Cole was actually a real person. He was not a jolly old soul. He was the last Roman military commander of the Northern Command, and some think he was the first British commander of the British Army. So he was in an interesting position where somewhere around the early 5th it's late 4th, early 5th century, somewhere around there. King Cole was active in Britain, and he probably was a very important Roman officer to start with, and then became king or ruler or general, however you want to call it. So I've done a lot of things like that, and really the stories relating to Arthur have really, all those horrible TV shows and movies they've been doing in recent years have just turned my stomach. They're not even good versions of Mallory's Mort to Arthur. There's a whole bunch of primary folklore and stories and poems from Wales and Scotland and elsewhere relating to the Arthurian era that most Americans and even Brits know very little about. There's a wealth of sources other than Mallory's book, which is where most of the modern versions, the Guinevere, Arthur, Lancelot triangle comes from.
Yeah, for sure. And most of us, myself included, we get most of our King Arthur information from Monty Python. It's just kind of it's just the way it is. Chris, thank you so much. We've got the links up for you. They're below and over on social media and on our website. And I would love to have a show about King Arthur and a discussion about that in the future. Okay, so thank you so much, and Happy New Year. Thank you, Chris.
Same to you.
Perfect show right there. That was a perfect show. And I was looking at some of the comments. It should have been called Dixie Spirits and the Civil War Ghosts. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. That was perfect. All right. Tomorrow night, we're going to be talking about A Flash of Beauty, the sequel. Tomorrow night, it is Bigfoot. All right. I cannot wait. It is going to be a fantastic night tomorrow night. And Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Thank you to Bill. Thank you to Jonacide. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Kevin. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy, spaceboymusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. And this broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2023, soon to be 2024. Starting next week, by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your Jimmy Church. Until tomorrow night, go back, Lee Tappy.